Did you know your handwriting carries the emotional wounds you never talk about? In this episode, we explore how emotions like stress, anger, loneliness, and fear are silently destroying your health. Yes, your health. And how a powerful science backed method called graphotherapy can rewire your brain and help you heal. If you're a student, a career aspirant, working professional, an elderly, male or female, or any other gender, or anyone who has ever said, मैं ठीक हूं, while you're clearly not fine, this episode is for you. Let me tell you the story of Arjun, 23 years old, engineering graduate from a two-tier college in UP. He had been preparing for campus placements for 6 months straight. No weekends, no breaks, Maggie at midnight, 5 cups of chai a day. He kept telling himself, Bas thoda aur, just a little more. His friends thought he was a machine. His mom thought he was doing great, but his body had a completely different opinion. One Tuesday morning, right before his third interview in 2 weeks, Arjun's chest started to hurt. He thought it was just tension. He went to the interview anyway. He did not get the job, and that night his blood pressure was 150 over 95. He was 23 years old. Now, here's the crazy part. There was nothing physically wrong with his heart. No blocked arteries, no disease, but something was wrong. And the answer, when it finally came, was hiding in the most unexpected place: his handwriting. Welcome to today's episode, and I'm your host, Kapeel Gupta. And today we are going to talk about something nobody teaches in school and no coaching class will ever cover: how your emotions are directly, scientifically, immeasurably affecting your physical health, and how a practice called graphotherapy can help you change that. Now, this is not a spiritual lecture, this is hard science. And by the end of this episode, you'll never look at your handwriting the same way again. Hi, I'm Kapeel Gupta, career coach, life mentor, and founder of Study Abroad Academy. I empower students, parents, and conscious professionals to design a fulfilling life and career by aligning their minds, values, and aspirations. And I do it with coaching, mindset work, and the game changing power of graphotherapy because students deserve more than just guidance, they deserve transformation. So, before we get into the emotional drama, let us understand what is actually happening inside your body. Now, there's a whole field of science called psychoneuroimmunology. Yes, that is one word: psychoneuroimmunology. Fancy name, simple idea. Your mind, your nervous system, and your immune system are all connected and talking to each other all the time, like a WhatsApp group that never goes silent. And when you feel an emotion, your brain sends chemical signals to your entire body. The two big chemicals you need to know are cortisol and adrenaline, your body's emergency response team. Now, they're very useful when you need to run from a lion. The problem? Your brain cannot tell the difference between a lion and your placement interview, or your family fighting at home, or that WhatsApp message from your crush that says seen and nothing else. So, according to the American Psychological Association, about 77% of people regularly experience physical symptoms caused by stress. In India, a 2022 survey by Optum India found that 36% of Indian employees suffer from stress, higher than the global average of 25%. Your body is carrying your emotions, whether you acknowledge them or not. And now, here is where it gets really interesting. Scientists who study the connection between the hand, the brain, and emotions have discovered something remarkable. The act of writing by hand directly activates the brain's neural pathways linked to emotion processing and self regulation. Now, this is not coincidence. This is the scientific foundation of something called graphotherapy, and we will come back to this. I promise. And let us talk about stress first, because stress is the boss villain in this whole story. Picture chronic stress like that one relative who shows up uninvited at every family function, eats all the food, creates drama, and refuses to leave. Now, that is what stress does to your body. When cortisol keeps flowing for weeks and months without a break, your blood pressure goes up, your digestive system slows down, which is why so many stressed students have constant पेट दर्द, yes, stomach ache. Your immune system weakens, which is why you always catch a cold right after your exams end. That is not a coincidence. That is your body saying, phew, the threat is over. Now I can collapse. A Harvard Medical School study found that people with high chronic stress have 40% higher risk of heart disease. 40%. And now, here is something extraordinary that most people do not know. A trained graphologist, someone who studies handwriting, can actually see your stress in your writing. Heavy pen pressure on the page, that is unexpressed tension living in your hand. Shaky, uneven letters, that is anxiety showing up physically. Cramped, compressed writing with letters leaning backwards, that is someone who is pulling away from life, protecting themselves from overwhelm. See, your handwriting is essentially an x ray of your emotional state. Just like a doctor can diagnose from an x ray and then prescribe treatment, a graphologist can identify the emotional patterns in your writing and then use graphotherapy. Yes, specific handwriting exercises to begin rewiring those patterns from the root. And this is not magic. Research published in journals on neuroscience confirms that the hand brain connection is so strong that changing how you write can actually change how you feel and think. And now, let us move to something softer but equally powerful: grief and sadness. In the context of Indian youth today, grief can look like many things. It can be the grief of failing an exam you studied hard for, the grief of not making it to IIT, the grief of watching your peers move forward while you feel stuck, the quiet sadness of feeling like you're simply not enough. The World Health Organization says depression is the single largest contributor to global disability. In India alone, over 56 million people suffer from depression. That is more than the entire population of South Korea. And when sadness becomes chronic, it suppresses your immune function. Wounds heal slower. You get sick more often. Research in the journal JAMA Psychiatry has found links between long term depression and higher risk of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And now, let me tell you something remarkable about grief and handwriting. When a person is carrying deep sadness or unexpressed loss, their handwriting shows it in very specific ways. The baseline, the invisible line your words sit on, begins to droop downward. Letters become smaller as though the person is shrinking themselves. The spaces between words grow larger, reflecting emotional distance from others. Now, here is what makes graphotherapy so powerful for grief. When you consciously practice writing with an upward baseline, you're not just making prettier handwriting, you're sending new neurological signals to your brain. You're physically training your nervous system to associate writing and, by extension, thinking with an upward movement, with hope, with forward momentum. See, dozens of clients who have gone through graphotherapy programs have reported that within weeks of consistent practice, the heaviness they had been carrying for months began to lift. Not because they talked about it endlessly, but because they rewrote it literally. See, anger has a very special place in the Indian household. We are a country where getting angry is sometimes seen as a sign of passion and authority. But science has some uncomfortable news for that philosophy. When you get angry, your body goes into full war mode. Adrenaline floods your system. Your heart rate shoots up. Your blood vessels tighten. A study from the University of Michigan found that people who experienced regular intense anger were 3 times more likely to have a heart attack. 3 times. Even recalling an angry memory for just 8 minutes was enough to temporarily reduce their heart's ability to pump blood efficiently. In India, we have a particular flavor of anger that nobody really names, the anger of unmet expectations. The quiet, simmering resentment of working hard and not being rewarded. The internal Sharma ji ka beta to IAS ban gaya loop that plays on repeat. That suppressed anger is arguably even more dangerous than the kind you shout out loud. And here is where handwriting reveals what words cannot. Angry people, especially those carrying suppressed anger, often write with extreme pressure. Their pen nearly tears through the paper. Their letters have sharp, aggressive angles. Their writing is often erratic, with letters of inconsistent size, as though the hand cannot decide how much force to use. A graphologist sees this not as a personality flaw, but as an emotional signal. And through graphotherapy, the practice of consciously softening pen pressure and rounding sharp letters formations begin to calm the nervous system response associated with anger. One session at a time, one stroke at a time, the brain starts learning. And it is safe to be soft. It's safe to let go. Multiple clients who have done anger specific graphotherapy exercises have reported a noticeable reduction in irritability and reactive behavior within 30 to 60 days of daily practice. That is faster than most therapy modalities. And all you need is a pen and paper. Now, here comes the one that really surprised me when I was researching this topic: loneliness. We have never been more connected in human history. 5G, Instagram, Snapchat, 47 messaging apps, and yet loneliness is at an all time high, especially among people between 18 and 30. A landmark study by researcher Julianne Holt Lundstad, which analyzed data from over 3.4 million people, found that social isolation increased the risk of premature death by 26%. The study concluded that loneliness is as dangerous to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15 cigarettes a day. In India, the loneliness problem is complex and layered. Many young people are physically surrounded by family, but emotionally completely isolated. You cannot tell your father you're anxious because he'll say, "Pehle naukri to lao." You cannot tell your mother you are sad because she'll start worrying about your rishta. So you smile and you say, "I'm fine." And you carry it all alone, and your body pays the price. Loneliness has a very specific signature in writing. People who feel isolated tend to leave very wide right margins, unconsciously avoiding the future, pulling back from the world. Their words may be beautifully formed, but sit alone on the page, cut off from each other with excessive spacing. And there's a literal emptiness on the paper that mirrors the emotional emptiness inside. In graphotherapy, working on reducing right margins and practicing connected, flowing handwriting has a measurable effect on feelings of connection and openness. You are retraining the subconscious association between reaching forward into the future, into the world, and safety. Many people who felt chronically lonely and withdrawn have found that even simple handwriting exercises focused on connectivity made them feel subtly more open to engaging with people around them. It sounds almost too simple, but remember, the hand and the brain are in constant conversation. So when you change one, you change the other. And fear is one of the most useful emotions evolution gave us. Back in the jungle, fear kept our ancestors alive. Brilliant system, terrible problem. Your brain is still using the same ancient system to respond to results day, job rejection emails, your boss calling you unexpectedly, or your crush posting a story with someone else. According to the WHO, anxiety disorders affect about 4% of the global population, with numbers growing sharply in India among the 20 to 35 age group. Chronic anxiety keeps your nervous system in sympathetic overdrive, your body's engine running at maximum RPM 24 hours a day without turning off. The result? Exhaustion even after sleeping, digestive problems, hormonal imbalances, and a vicious circle where anxiety leads to poor performance, which leads to more anxiety. See, anxiety is perhaps the most clearly visible emotion in handwriting. Look at someone's handwriting when they're genuinely anxious, and you'll see it immediately. The letters are uneven in height, the pressure fluctuates, the spacing is erratic, and there's often a visible tremor or shakiness in the strokes. The I dots and the T bars, which a graphologist pays close attention to, are scattered, high flying, often missing entirely. The person's attention is everywhere and nowhere. See, graphotherapy for anxiety works on grounding. Specific exercises focus on slow, deliberate baseline control, on forming clear, complete letters, on bringing the I dot close to the letter. These exercises sound trivially simple, and that is exactly what makes them brilliant for anxious people who often cannot engage with complex interventions. The act of slowly, mindfully forming letters activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's rest and digest mode. It is, in effect, a moving meditation, a calligraphy of calm, and unlike meditation that requires you to empty your mind, a nearly impossible task for an anxious person. Graphotherapy gives your mind something gentle to focus on, one stroke at a time. And now we come to what I believe is the most Indian of all emotional health problems: suppression. The art of bottling everything up and presenting a perfectly composed face to the world while slowly combusting on the inside. Research published on the journal Psychological Science found that people who suppressed negative emotions showed elevated physiological stress markers even in situations that were not stressful. Basically, your body stays stressed even when your brain thinks it has moved on. Higher rates of hypertension, autoimmune disorders, and in some studies, faster cancer progression have all been linked to long term emotional suppression. In India, emotional suppression is a cultural virtue. Boys are told, मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता. Girls are told, लोग क्या कहेंगे. Everyone is told, adjust kar lo. And so we become world class emotional suppressors. We swallow hurt, we push down grief, we perform okayness, and then we wonder why we have migraines at 25, why our backs hurt for no reason, why we feel empty even when life looks finer on paper. And here is the astonishing thing: emotional suppression has a very clear signal in handwriting. The capital letters, particularly the personal pronoun I, which represents the self, become small, shrunk, and sometimes almost indistinguishable from lowercase letters. The signature, which represents how we present ourselves to the world, becomes illegible or compressed. Loop formations in letters like L, H, and D that represent emotional expression become flattened or absent. A graphologist reading these signs is not judging you. They are reading the conversation your hand is having with your subconscious. And graphotherapy, in this case, focuses on consciously enlarging the self, literally. Practicing writing a larger, more confident personal pronoun I, allowing loops to form fully and freely, letting the signature breathe. These exercises, done consistently, have helped many people move from a deeply suppressed state to one of genuine self expression, not through years of analysis, but through daily minutes of intentional writing. By now, you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds fascinating. But what exactly is graphotherapy? Is it some kind of alternative magic? Let me clear this up because this deserves a proper explanation. Graphology is the science of studying handwriting to understand personality, emotional patterns, and psychological states. It has been used in Europe for over a century, in HR hiring in France, in clinical psychology in Israel, in forensic investigations worldwide. The principle is simple. Because handwriting originates as a brain impulse that travels through the nervous system to the hand, handwriting is literally a printout of your brain's current emotional and psychological state. A trained graphologist can read that printout with remarkable accuracy. Graphotherapy is the therapeutic application of graphology. If graphology is the diagnosis, graphotherapy is the treatment. By deliberately changing specific features of your handwriting, pen pressure, letter size, slant, spacing, baseline, loop formation, you send new neurological signals back up to the brain. You're essentially using the hand brain highway in reverse. Instead of the brain creating handwriting, the handwriting begins to reshape the brain. This is backed by neuroscience research on neuroplasticity, the brain's scientifically proven ability to form new neural pathways in response to new experiences and behaviors. A typical graphotherapy program involves an initial handwriting analysis session where a trained graphologist identifies the emotional blocks and patterns visible in your script. Based on this, a customized set of daily handwriting exercises is designed, specific alphabets, precious slants, and strokes that target the precise emotional patterns that need to shift. The exercise usually take 10 to 15 minutes a day. That is less time than most people spend scrolling Instagram before bed. And the results? Clients typically begin to notice changes within 21 to 45 days in their mood, their clarity of thought, their relationships, and even their physical well being. Because when the emotional roots heals, the body follows. So we've spent a lot of time in the dark. Time to turn some lights on. Because here is the beautiful flip side of all the science. Just as negative emotions show up in the handwriting and damage your health, positive emotional states create handwriting that literally looks lighter, more expansive, and more alive. Joy, love, gratitude, and a sense of purpose are not just nice feelings, they're physiologically powerful. When you feel genuine joy, your brain releases dopamine and serotonin. When you feel connected and loved, it releases oxytocin, which reduces blood pressure and inflammation. A famous study from the University of Kentucky that followed 180 Catholic nuns over decades found that those who expressed the most positive emotions in their journals lived an average of 10 years longer than those who expressed fewer positive emotions. In handwriting, people in a genuinely positive and emotionally healthy state write with slightly upward rising baseline. Their letters have comfortable, consistent sizing. Their pen pressure is moderate and even. Their spacing is balanced, not too crowded, not too isolated. Their writing literally has an ease and flow to it. So, this is also one of the most encouraging things about graphotherapy. As the practice progresses and emotional healing occurs, people begin to see their handwriting naturally shift in these positive directions without being told to. The handwriting begins to smile, as one of my favorite graphologists puts it. And when your writing smiles, it's not just aesthetic, it is evidence that your nervous system is healing, that your brain is rewiring, that you are becoming, stroke by stroke, a slightly freer version of yourself. Remember Arjun from the beginning? After his health scare, someone introduced him to a graphologist. He was skeptical, honestly. Handwriting se kya hoga? But he was desperate enough to try. The graphologist looked at his handwriting and within minutes said, "You're carrying enormous fear of failure. You're deeply suppressing your feelings and you've almost no sense of your own worth independent of your achievements." Arjun sat in silence for a full minute because nobody had ever said that to him before. Not his parents, not his professors, not his friends, but he knew in his bones that it was true. Over the next 45 days, Arjun did his graphotherapy exercises every morning for 15 minutes before opening his laptop. Some days it felt silly, most days it felt surprisingly calming, and then slowly things began to shift. His sleep improved, the chest tightness reduced. He felt less like he was running from a tiger and more like he was walking towards something. He got a job he actually liked, not because the stress disappeared, but because he had stopped being his own worst enemy. So here's the truth at the heart of today's episode. Your emotions are not your weakness. They are data. When you feel stressed, your body is asking for relief. When you feel sad, it's asking for care. When you feel angry, it's pointing at something that needs to change. And when you feel lonely, it's asking for connection. For too long, we've been taught to push these signals down, to perform okayness, to keep moving, and our bodies and our handwriting have been quietly keeping score. Graphotherapy does not ask you to talk endlessly about your pain. It does not ask you to think positive or pretend things are fine. It meets you exactly where you are, on the page, and gives your body a practical, daily, science backed way to begin healing from the inside out, one stroke at a time. So, before you put away this podcast and go back to your day, I want to ask you one question. When did you last write something by hand? Not a to do list, not notes in a lecture, but something that came from how you actually feel inside. If the answer is, I cannot even remember, that tells you something important. And if you've been listening to this episode feeling a quiet recognition, "Yaar, this is literally me," then I want you to take the next step. Book a handwriting analysis session with a certified graphologist like me. The link is in the description of the podcast. In one session, you will receive more personalized insight into your emotional patterns than most people get from months of vague self reflection. You will understand why you feel what you feel, not through someone telling you what is wrong with you, but through the objective, non judgmental language of your own handwriting. And from there, a customized graphotherapy program can begin, giving your nervous system a gentle, consistent, daily way to heal. You do not need to wait for a health crisis like Arjun. You do not need to feel broken to deserve support. Every person walking around in this high pressure, high expectation, comparison drenched world we live in has emotional patterns that are worth understanding and healing. And your handwriting, this thing you have been doing since class 1 without ever realizing its depth, is one of the most powerful tools available for that journey. So, if this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who always says they are fine. Follow this podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to take that step, To understand what your handwriting is saying about your emotional world and to begin changing it, reach out. A session could be the beginning of something genuinely life changing because your future depends not just on how hard you work, but on how free you feel. So, see you in the next episode.